Hello, I am Paul Chartier, and this is Heart of Gold, and for over 10 years we have spotlighted nonprofits on this program. With what's happening right now in the world with the opioid epidemic and drug overdoses that's even hit Lexington, we're going to address that tonight. So I hope you stay tuned, watch these two gentlemen, and if you know people or you are in that situation, please do something, because Steve Goss is going to tell his story. That's probably a remarkable story. And Dr. Walt Lubbers from UK, an emergency room doctor at UK, who probably has treated scores, if not hundreds of people. So we're going to attack this topic tonight and maybe get someplace.
Great.
Thank you, gentlemen.
You're welcome. Absolutely.
How did it start with you, Steve?
10 years ago, working at UPS, broke a safety rule, injured my back, got put on pain pills for my back injury, and kind of just after that started using opiates recreationally. And I mean, I went times without it, but I use them recreationally, but eventually just kind of you get addicted to them, you know?
I'm a little bit naive, maybe a lot naive. How did you, after you get a prescription and that runs out, then what happens?
Well, I guess you know, if you know somebody that was selling them, you know.
So you're buying them on the street?
Yeah, that's how it started, yeah.
And again, the naive me, what was it costing you a week, a month?
Probably at the height of it, definitely probably $300, $400, $500 a week, you know, just depends.
And you were working?
Yeah, yeah.
And how much of your budget was being taken up by the drugs?
Probably half of it.
Yeah.
Maybe less, you know, but.
And where were you working?
Well, this, my addiction, you know, spread over years, you know. So like, there was times I didn't use for a year or anything. But then, you know, you meet somebody else and you just think, I'm gonna do it once, and you kind of pick it back up. But it got really bad, like really probably about four years ago.
Now, when you say really bad, because there are people watching that may be really bad.
Yeah.
There are people watching that may know someone like you who's doing it really badly. How do you identify it, and what were you going through?
Man, I was going through a lot, but that ended up kind of changing from when those pills weren't around anymore, changing into like the heroin, which is really, I think, the worst, you know. And I mean, it's hard to explain, but just spending all your money. If you notice somebody that just constantly has droopy eyes and has slurred words, and you never know where their money is going, it's probably definitely something, you know, like opioid use.
I was at a breakfast several months ago, and there was a recovering. How can I define you?
Just, I mean, you're always called a recovering addict once you've been addicted, even if you don't use for 40 years. Because that's how they consider it in recovery, is that you always be a recovering addict.
Does that offend you?
I don't like, you know, being called that, but then nobody calls me that.
Well, I don't want
to. No, it doesn't offend me. It doesn't offend me.
When I called you to be on, I called you a hero for what you are doing right now.
Yeah,
and I think to lump you in that definition, I don't think anybody should be doing that, because I think you're at a different place right now.
Yeah.
You're functioning, you're doing great.
I'm just trying to be a productive member of society.
So I'm at this breakfast, and there was a police officer, a social worker, and one of you on. Young man, took him to the depths. And the naive me, that there are people in Lexington that go to the needle exchange with suits and ties on and dresses on to go there after work. There are people that work executive jobs that, I guess, go into the stairwell 5, 6, 7 times a day and do whatever they do and then go back. So if you see people maybe leaving their office, is that kind of a pattern as well?
I guess it could be. I've not really worked around, you know, people like that, but I work with people that aren't in offices, and if you see people disappear a lot, you know, just anybody, and you don't know what they're doing, you know, You can tell there's symptoms, you know, especially if you've been a user, you can tell if anybody's under the influence of anything really, you know, opiate related, just by looking at them or the way they sound.
Practical, theoretical, but you see it. Dr. Lubbers, what do you see?
What do we see in terms of the folks that come in for
The frequency,
for help,
and
or
then
for
when you look at
overdoses,
them, what do you see?
everything? Well, certainly we see a lot of unfortunate people, and I think it's good to acknowledge that nobody wants to be labeled. Let's face it, nobody wants to be labeled a drug user. But it's so frustrating when you see people come in that are there for an overdose or there for a complication of drug use, like endocarditis or a bad infection or something like that. And they say, I do want to change. I don't like this, but I don't have any way to stop it because they're so strong. The addiction is so much there that even though, heck, I've had two heart valve replacements, and I'm working on my third one, and I've got terrible problems related to this, and yet they need to go out and use. There's still that addiction there. So I think sometimes it's so hard to try to find a way to help people break that when you're it almost seems like you're kind of your own worst enemy, you know. But that's just the grip that it has on people.
You'd like to think that it's very identifiable by appearance, but it spans, and you see it. What do you see?
Absolutely. Well, we see, like you said, it's not necessarily the guy that's living under the bridge. It's a guy with a three-piece suit on, or a lady that's a housewife at home taking care of her kids, or somebody that just same way got hurt, started using meds legitimately for pain, and then found that they got addicted to it, which is, it's hard to break people of saying, oh, it's their own fault. It's their own fault. They did it to themselves, but we kind of help people get started on it. And it's not really anybody's fault. It's a disease. So it's a disease that affects everybody, potentially any socioeconomic class, any profession, any body is potentially someone that could fall into addiction.
I think you're a young guy to be a doctor in an emergency room. To your credit.
Okay, thank you.
Doogie Howser comes to mind. If you remember that TV show, that 15-year-old
So
doctor. How long have you been a doctor?
7 years.
And mostly at UK or?
Mostly at UK. I did most of my training at UK and come back as a faculty member at UK now.
All in the emergency room or a rotation, and that's where you landed?
In the emergency room.
Okay. 7 years ago, what did you see compared to right now in terms of frequency and severity?
Certainly we saw overdoses 7 years ago. It's been a constant emergency room problem. I think what we're seeing now is that a lot of folks end up in the emergency room revived, and to the point that we don't really have to do much because EMS has taken care of it most of the time. They've given the antidote, or they've taken care of the person to the extent that they need to. So we don't see probably that many more resuscitations from it. Unfortunately, though, we do see a lot of people with the complications, like I was talking about, and we see folks that are a victim of those stronger drugs, or drugs that they thought they knew how to use, and then it turns out they got a little bit of a bad batch. The quality control wasn't very good on that heroin, and so they ended up with a lot higher dose than they thought. And we've also started to see, I think, a fair number of people, and this probably isn't new. We've realized it recently. A fair number of people that come in recently after they get out of, say, jail or detox or rehab. The most dangerous couple of weeks in your life as a drug user is going to be the first couple of weeks after you actually get out of rehab, the first couple of weeks that you're actually sober. And unfortunately, we see a lot of people that come in with that exact story, like they're doing the right thing, they finally got somebody to get them help, they got clean for a month, and then within a week and a half, when they actually had the drug in front of them again, they ended up overdosing. And that's a tragic story.
Overdose because of the potency, or because something in like fentanyl that is something their body's not used to, and it just takes them away.
You lose your tolerance when you stop, almost essentially when you stop using, you immediately start losing your tolerance to the parts of the opiate overdose that'll kill you. So the things that cause the most problems are that they suppress your respiratory drive. And that's one of the first things that goes away when you stop using, is that tolerance to the respiratory drive. So then when you use same amount that you might have been using before, your body's no longer tolerant to it and you overdose.
You're nodding your head. You've lived this.
Yeah.
Talk about it.
I was listening to him. Yeah, I just know about the nodding the head, and you know, I mean, when I went to jail before I got into drug court.
Well, let's talk timeline, how all this happened, because again, there are people watching that they are you at every step along the way. Talk about those steps.
As in recovery, or as in like from the whole addiction thing?
From the whole addiction thing. Yeah. And then we'll get into recovery.
You just use more and more. You know, well, I mean, you can definitely build up a tolerance, but yeah, I mean, that's what causes overdoses, I think, is being, you know, losing some of your tolerance from trying to quit and then using it. It's dangerous. I overdosed a couple times, so I know that it's, and I had to be revived. I was nodding my head thinking about, you know, when I went to the emergency room, I was revived by the ambulance, and you know, they watch you for 4 or 5 hours and then they kind of release you. You know, there's no, unless you get in trouble, I wasn't given any education about like where to go for help or anything like that, you know, whenever it happened to me.
When you overdosed, were you at home, at work? What environment were you in?
One time was at my grandparents' house, actually, and another time sitting in my car at a gas station.
At your grandparents' house, you took drugs into your grandparents' house?
No, I did them probably right before I got there.
Okay.
And you know, stopped by and ended up overdosing there.
So you were around people at that point. The other time you were in the gas station.
Yeah.
Were you in the car alone?
Yeah.
And who would have known that you weren't just sleeping in the car?
Apparently my grandpa. I was on the phone with him. I was, you know, messed up, and I called my grandpa. I could tell something was really wrong, and asked me where I was, and I said the gas station, and he called my dad, and my dad they all live right there in the same area, and he went over to the gas station and found me in the car. But I don't know, I had dark windows, so if he didn't come there and find me there unconscious, there's no telling what would have happened.
So by the grace of God, you were talking to your grandfather.
Yeah.
Yeah. Overdosed twice, and we're not trying to pile on. I'm trying to understand.
Yeah.
So when people are watching, well, gosh, that was me. After the overdose, then what happened?
I mean, at that point in my life, I just kept using, you know. Yeah, until I ended up getting arrested. Went to get, hadn't done any in a few weeks. I tried to move out of town to get away from it. Moved down to Richmond, and was trying to do the right thing, and ended up not using for 2-3 weeks, and drove up to Lexington just to buy a small amount, and did it, and went to drive back to Richmond, stopped at the gas station, and they called the cops on me because I was slurring my words. Before I could pump my gas, the cops came and arrested me for possession. Yeah.
So you get arrested. Then what?
Took me to jail. Didn't know it, but I had a very small amount of heroin in a card slot in my wallet. And when I got to the jail, they changed my misdemeanor possession to felony promoting contraband, thinking I was trying to sneak it into the jail, but I didn't even know it was there.
Yeah.
It had probably been there for the whole 2 weeks, and I didn't know it. And yeah, so that was like, went from misdemeanor to a felony. I got out on probation, and they knocked it back down from felony to misdemeanor. But the probation didn't scare me enough, and I kept using a few times and failed a few drug tests and got my probation revoked by the judge and was back in jail.
So after you got arrested, it's mandatory for you to go back to your parole officer, somebody, and they drug test you.
Yeah, probation,
Okay.
standard probation.
Okay. And they drug test you, and then you
Yeah.
failed that.
Yeah, because they only drug test you like once a week or something.
And then what happened?
failed a couple. They called me downtown. I went down there and they took me in and took me to court. And the judge said, "Your probation is revoked." You know, I wanted me to serve a year in jail, which wouldn't have gave me any kind of treatment or anything. I mean, I just would have been locked up for a year.
Yeah.
But I asked for the Fayette County Drug Court. I had heard about it, and I heard basically it's an extremely strict version of probation. And they also educate you a lot on substance abuse and relapse, and the whole time you're in it, which is for most people is well over 18 months. You have to do all this stuff, and just kind of, they're there to help transform people into productive members of society, really. But most of the people, you know, they haven't had jobs and stuff. That's part of drug court. You have to keep a job. You know, a lot of these people in drug court, they've never even had a job. They've sold drugs or whatever. But anyways, yeah, I asked for it and spent a total of 5-6 weeks in jail waiting to get into drug court. And when I got in there, they released me. And, you know, just at that point, after that 6 weeks in jail and missing my daughter and everything, I just was like, I'm done with this.
How old
I'd
was
already
your daughter
decided.
at that time?
Man, like a 1. Yeah,
Okay.
like
so
1.
So you get out, you've got a 1-year-old,
Yeah.
and your brain's thinking, I can continue to do drugs or love
Take
your
care
daughter.
of my family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How tough was that?
Not tough, but actually it's just crazy. Before I got out that time, I just something changed in my head, and I was like, I'm not gonna do this anymore. And so I just got out and got a job and never used again. I did use the assistance of the Vivitrol shot. It's a shot you get once a month that completely blocks opiates, the effects of opiates that make you want to use. And I got that just as a backup because drug court was paying for it, and it's extremely expensive.
Once
so,
a month?
Yeah.
How long did you get that shot?
6 months, which is what the doctor kind of recommended, and at that point, I just didn't get it anymore because I was already done using anyways. I just took it as a backup.
When you hear this, you see a gurney come in, and maybe they walk in sometimes, mostly on a gurney, and you don't know the story behind what's under the sheet. What keeps you motivated to just keep helping these people?
I mean, I think that kind of story is basically it. Like, if you only see, oh, okay, it's another drug overdose,
Yeah.
and like, it's not a person that's got a kid and, you know, a family potentially. It's just another drug overdose.
Yeah.
Treat them, get them out. If you do that, you're going to see the same people come in over and over again. You're going to see the same problem come in over and over again, and everybody's going to look. Literally, it's just a body on a gurney that you do something to, and then they leave.
Right.
I think the thing that kind of keeps a lot of us doing what we do is trying to keep the humanity of it, and finding, you know, hearing from somebody like, yeah, I had a huge problem, and eventually I fixed it. And it sounds like it probably took a while to fix, but if you keep in mind that each of these people are somebody that probably loves somebody and has somebody that loves them and does have stuff out there to, you know, that makes them a human just like the rest of us. That's what I think keeps most of us going, those of us that do this.
If we could just, logically thinking, if we can just give every drug addict a baby, a reason to live, then that solves the problem. They've got a reason not to do drugs.
That's stronger than that for some people, you know. You know.
I will say this to you because you're at UK. I've encountered a lot of doctors at UK, and you are typical. You care about people, you care about the patients. You can't inject in anybody passion and concern and compassion, but for some reason, the people that UK hires are fabulous human beings, and you're another one. And as Steve was telling his story, you're not sitting there like a doctor looking down your nose like you're one of those that I've helped, and then you're off doing it again. I mean, you're engaged and listening to what Steve is saying. And it says a lot about you, and it says a lot about you, again, to be on this program, because it can't be easy to talk about what you've done.
flattered. But yeah, no, it's like I said, it's everybody out there. Nobody, and maybe if I can just ask, like when you talk about when you overdosed, were you going out with the mindset like I'm intending, I'm going to use a whole bunch of heroin today?
No,
because
I didn't use it every day at that time when I was overdosing. There was spurts of time when I didn't have money,
Yeah.
and so just go bought some, and no, I wasn't thinking that. It just happened.
Yeah, it's not like you're, and I think that's everybody. Nobody like makes a list of things to do in the day. Like, today I'm going to go up, I'm going to have breakfast, I'm going to make myself a sandwich, and then I'm going to go overdose, and I'm going to wake up in the hospital, and I'm going to get another sandwich, and then I'm going to go home. Like that's never the way that it works out, and it's so hard to try to rectify that for folks that argue, well, these people are doing it to themselves. We shouldn't be reviving them. Some folks. There was a news story recently about a town in Ohio that wanted to take naloxone, the opiate antidote, basically, take that off of their ambulances because it's very expensive. And then they said, well, maybe instead of taking it off, we'll give you like 2 shots, and on your 3rd strike, you don't get it anymore. And I think that problem is a problem with us. It's not a problem with the folks that are using or the folks that are overdosing. It's that we're not really getting it. That somebody can go out and seriously propose that, not as like hey, we can't afford to do it anymore, but like we're tired of spending money on it. It's a disease. It's a problem just like diabetes or heart disease.
Absolutely, and it's easy to say it's their problem. Why are they doing it? They should be fixing it themselves. But you're not atypical that people start using painkillers for Brett Favre started using painkillers, and all of a sudden he's hooked. And then you just don't know what to do. And then you stand up and you're maybe ashamed, embarrassed, and then you have to go to some facility. So you made a choice to cut it off, live for your daughter, and then at that point, what's happened since then?
I ended up just getting a job that I was tired of having to apply for jobs where you fill out all of your criminal record, and I had just some possessions and stuff like that. And I just asked drug court. They work with Voc Rehab, and they were like, they can find you a job, and they were looking for a job for my skill set, for my degree in computer networking.
You have a degree?
Yeah.
From where?
Just BCTC.
Don't just say BCTC.
Well, it's just an associate's degree, but it was for computer networking.
Yeah, I'm just a genius from BCTC, that's all. No big deal. Okay.
Anyways, they sent me to the OWO place, Opportunity for Work and Learning, and they had just tried to start a 3D printer project, but they didn't have anybody there that could necessarily figure it out. And they put me in that, and ended up just kind of being in charge of it for.
How long ago was that?
This was last January 18th when I started working there, a year and a half ago or so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I used to build 3D printers, and they ended up sending the manufacturing to China about 3 months ago, and quality supervisor position was open, and we used to do a lot of stuff on the computer. So I applied for it, and now I'm just a quality supervisor, and it's fun. I enjoy it, and just go to work every day, stay clean, take care of the family.
You've got a daughter. How old is she now?
3 in July.
You can say her name on TV.
Layla.
Hey, Layla, you can wave to her.
Hey, Layla.
And you have a woman in your life?
Yeah, my girlfriend.
And life is going well for you?
Yeah, I just moved to Lexington. I moved out of a crappy apartment in Richmond whenever I was using, and just got a house up here in Lexington, and because I work in Lexington, and it's nice, it's enjoyable.
Life
the
is
good things can. Well, yeah, I just got a new car a couple weeks ago. I went from driving an old broke down Pontiac to a new Infinity, so it's things can change in your life.
You're climbing that mountain, and congratulations. Well, we had talked about you see them, you get them functioning, and then there they go. That's not your job, but when there they go, where do they go?
Usually wherever they came from, honestly, and that's one of the issues with it is emergency rooms. We're usually tasked with it because we're kind of, for the most part, the only healthcare that a lot of drug users will be able to interact with. So you hit the emergency room and you get the shot of naloxone. We make sure you breathe for 2-3 hours and that you're doing okay. At that point, we're not really set up to do a whole lot else. Like most of us don't have treatment, realistically real treatment or real solutions for you. So what we've tried to do in some places is give people at least say something they can use. So some folks talk about using, starting people on buprenorphine, which is sort of like today's methadone, basically, to bridge you off of the more dangerous stuff. People have talked about doing that from the ER. One of the things that we found that was at least fairly successful, as best we can tell, was giving people naloxone, the overdose antidote, basically, in a sprayable form that people could. You obviously wouldn't spray yourself if you overdosed, but hopefully if you came upon it with a friend or if a family member found you and had this available, they'd be able to give it to you and reverse that overdose and get you breathing again and get you back to at least a passable state of health until EMS can get there and get you to a hospital itself.
We had talked before we flipped the cameras on what people can do, and we're going to put a phone number up here. Mountain Comprehensive Care, that is part of the local Catholic Action Center off of Eastern Parkway. Apparently, they have some location that people can go, and once they get into that cycle, they can go there and get some kind of attention and long-term attention to try to get off this. In the last couple of minutes, we've got this epidemic. What should people do? What should people do?
What people?
The people that keep on using. Can they do anything? They have to want to do it.
Yeah, you just gotta want it. You can tell the people to do anything, but from my experience, until the person is really ready to quit, they're not going to. It's addictive,
The one person on that panel at the breakfast, the user ended up homeless in Dayton, Ohio, as a 20-something-year-old, living under a bridge, called his parents again and again and again. This time they called them and they said, "We're not helping you." He knew right then he needed to get help himself.
What can you do? Keep asking for help. That's part of it. If you're someone that's addicted to drugs, keep asking. Eventually, as frustrating as it is to beat your head against the wall, eventually you'll find somebody that will be able to help, or can find a friend of a friend who is able to get you the help you need. If you're anybody else, and even if you are somebody that's addicted, I think the things you can do to help save people's lives, number one, learn CPR. Because that's something that you can do, and you can stop that cycle of death when you come upon it. And the other thing people can do is get a naloxone kit, which I just saw, I think yesterday, a news report. It's available at the health department now. You have to take a 15-minute class to learn how to use it. But learn CPR, learn how to use naloxone, and basically try to keep the faith that these are people.
It's that kind of sensitivity and compassion that I wish everybody had, not just physicians, but everybody caring for people that are in this situation. Thank you for saving lives. Thank you for being a hero and hopefully saving lives by doing this. Steve, thank you. Dr. Lovers, you guys are great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks for tuning in. If you guys see anybody that you know that's addicted, going through problems, slurring words, make a phone call. It may be uncomfortable. Do something to save their life. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Paul Chartier.